Welcome, friends. We're a little bit tardy, but not late. A little bit tardy. Though we tarry, we don't tarry. Welcome to the Grace Hour. We're a Christian program that takes a dive into our daily challenges and helps us to learn our faith in a practical way. I'm Pastor Renaldo Brown, and I'm in the studio with Pastor Robbins, filling in for Pastor Shabelli, who is convalescing from hip surgery, who will be joining us eventually.
Wow.
Today, we've been talking about, actually all week, we've been talking about the morality of God. Is God moral? Because it's so interesting, Pastor Robbins, that we don't know God as much as we know morality, because morality is attached to our consciousness. So how we perceive our personal or social set of what is right and what is wrong, we are taught that culturally, family, that becomes the basis for how we make our decisions. So then we take that as a standard and apply it to God.
Yeah.
When really it should be God who defines our standards, but we don't know him as the ultimate standard. So it's a good question. And today we're addressing, as we capstone this week, we're addressing if God knows who will deny and accept him, is salvation really for all people? And please join us in the conversation. I'm sure you will. We'd love to hear from you on our Facebook and YouTube feeds. You can write in questions and comments. And hopefully you've subscribed to us, like almost 13,000 people have. You will subscribe to us so that you get notifications and you become a part of our online family.
Wow, 13,000.
Yes, sir.
Let's go.
We're coming.
Coming near that 20K mark.
Bit back. We want to get there.
Let's help us.
Please.
Lord.
Move. So we'll begin.
Move the needle.
We'll begin the conversation. I was thinking this right here, Pastor Robbins, to start the conversation, that this really is this is the thought about opportunity. This is not so much about what God knows and what God doesn't know. This is more an issue of the opportunity that we have.
Yeah.
So I'm approaching this from a man-based perspective, me seeing God. It's not like I get to know God and then I know his gospel, but I get to know the gospel, and through the gospel, I get to know God.
Right.
So this is more addressing opportunity. It's a question of opportunity, not really a question of fairness or a question of God's mind, because depending upon where you land, as far as divine sovereignty, free will, the nature, what God knows, how it affects his plan, how we participate. From my end, from the user end, the business end of my relationship with God begins with the gospel. Yeah. So when you think about the opportunity for salvation, what is the opportunity? First, you have the message. The message tells you the opportunity. Like when you get invited to a wedding, on the invitation, it tells you what opportunities you have.
Yes.
You can bring a +1. You can bring your kids. You can't bring your kids. It's difficult to bring young kids. You've been to a few weddings. You've seen young kids just terrorize receptions. But anyway, in other words, the invitation describes the opportunity. So for us, the invitation of the gospel has kind of made it very clear that it's a message that applies and is available for everyone. So the availability of the message says that there's a great opportunity. It's not a narrow opportunity. It's all can receive. Titus chapter 2, verse 11, grace appeared to all men. It's a whosoever in John 3:16. It's God's message. Then I would say, secondly, the will of God. What is God's will? The will drives the message. You can't have a will that's a certain way, but then you have a message that doesn't reflect that. The message is an expression of the will. Right. And God's will in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9 is that none would perish, right? In Isaiah 45, that all the ends of the earth would come to know God. God created man not to be distant from man, God, but to know him. And to that end, even when we made decisions counter to knowing God, he made a provision that we might know anyway. Then I would say also, too, if you think about God's provision for the plan, is that's the plan of redemption. Okay, we have a message, we have a will, we have a plan, and the plan is designed that I would know God. It's designed that anyone would know God. The plan of redemption speaks about man coming to God, because God comes to man and creates the opportunity, which the cross gives us. And then we have God's promise, which is that anyone that makes a decision, he will honor that decision. He will expose they'll take advantage of the opportunity. So I think that's a good opening thought about salvation is I want to make sure I understand the opportunity that I have.
Right.
When you say that salvation isn't really for everybody, if the opportunity is for everybody, then salvation's for everybody.
Yeah.
So if you narrow the opportunity, then you can narrow salvation, but don't narrow salvation to narrow the opportunity.
Well, listening to you right now makes it very clear that your orientation is like a humble approach.
Yes.
Right? You're not taking God and putting him on trial.
Right.
And you being the judge, right? Like, cause that's kind of how a lot of theology has moved. And these questions that we have here are really good questions. And when you think about it, as we've progressed in history, we have seemingly gotten smarter. You know, like we have read more books and written more books, right? And we have 13,000 followers. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like that prestige of knowledge and information has puffed us up. And perhaps it's best, no matter what the conclusion, like you said, which side you fall on, the more humble approach of the right orientation to the opportunity.
Yes.
And I like that. Opportunity is like the grace of God has appeared to all men. We were in darkness. You know, we were children of disobedience, like it says in Ephesians 2. Like we were just contrary to him.
Sure.
So if it wasn't for him, and so that does lead you to a place where, what did like the early fathers say? I was thinking about this. I read that up until the 16th century, the early church fathers all held to, except for Augustine, who like moved away. There's like early Augustine and late Augustine. All the early church fathers held to this beautiful proclamation that it was to all. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
And it wasn't till the 16th century through the Reformation, which great things have happened, but there was also a progress of like the human, the humanism that really kind of started to come in to, like, if you look through history, like that was the time when they were like, let's reorient this whole situation where God and his election stands and is his atonement for us. Because remember, the word atonement is very interesting. Tyndale is the one that created it.
Yeah, coined it. Yeah.
There's no such word of it. So to be at one with God was something foreign, and we had to put it on the map.
Well, not possible. They felt like where God was and the place that he held, which you find in certain religions.
Yes.
That God is unattainable and inaccessible.
Right.
So this distancing, the Reformation, in one respect, you could say it brought intimacy with God, but it also brought evaluation.
I know.
God.
And isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, okay, so God let us come into his living room. I mean, God came into our living room, maybe we could say it that way. But then we maybe have took it too far. Like, did we perhaps get familiar with it?
Interesting. But maybe we thought, but this is man. You give man was, that's why questions are good. We were made to ask questions because God gave us the ability to reason.
Right.
The facility of reasoning empowers questions. Yeah. So the animals don't ask questions because they don't reason, right? So we ask questions because we reason. So there is a point when by reasoning is without God. That's why God says in Isaiah 1, come, let us reason together. When I reason without God, my reasoning can be logical.
So good. Yes.
But it might even be factual.
Yeah.
But it might be not spiritual.
Yep. And also it's lacking, it's limited.
Yes.
Right? Like
it's corrupted and limited, which is a scary combination when you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to speak about God. Okay, this is why I need God to think about God, because without God, I think about God, the best I can be is limited in my understanding in 1 Corinthians 13:12. And I can also be corrupted in my thinking, which is God's not trying to renovate my mind. He says, use my mind because your mind is corrupted.
That's a good point.
You know?
So God's morality, that the question is like, is God's morality up for questioning? You know? And I thought of a verse that just came to me. Yep. It's Elihu who rebukes Job. He comes to him and he says in 33:12, he said, behold, in this you are not right. I will answer you. And then here's the sentence. God is greater than man. That's the verse. God is greater than man. And I love this progression where Elihu comes into the picture of Job's life, and he's really like putting him on trial in a way. Like, and we all do because of the circumstances of life, the lot that we're given, the view that we have, like the amount of information that human beings are now gathering. They don't know how to equate and put God. And he has been taken in the minds of man from the place of judgment, and we've put him on trial.
Yeah, we've kind of decided this is kind of like there's a culture now of repositioning my faith, reevaluating my faith, which is similar to that same time, and that's code sometimes.
Yeah,
many times that's code for I'm going to put God in his right place that I think he should be in. Based on my standards. So if I'm going to position God in my life based on my evaluation, I want to evaluate God whether he should be in that place.
Yeah.
So then I ask questions like, is God moral? I look at, we said it on Tuesday, I look at suffering and I judge God because of the suffering instead of judging the suffering according to God. I got it the other way around.
Would you call it like a lens that you grab a hold of?
Right.
Like, I think we say that sometimes, like there's a lens in which we see things through. And like you mentioned, it's flawed and
corrupted,
skewed and tempered at best, like it's not 2020. So I like this. Let's go back to your point about like opportunity.
Okay.
So if I view it based on the fact that it's opportunity, salvation has appeared to all men.
Okay.
How does that work itself out? You mentioned it, but like, think about like if I'm a new believer, salvation has come to me, but yet I still have all of these thoughts about who I thought God was.
Right.
How can you help me, or how can you help that person? Like, I don't know, like peel back the not misinformation, but the lenses of which they have been seeing through life.
Well, I think the first thought is I have to come to the place of humility and say, I don't know God. I think we have a tendency because of the internet, because of our, like you said, the modernicity and of intellect, we think we know. In first world culture, we're the epitome of we know. We are living in 1 Corinthians 8:1. We are puffed. And when you have a lot of knowledge, the first thing you become is a critic because you feel you're equipped to criticize. The more you know, the more easy it is to criticize. Like, I know better. You think you know, but I know better. So I think the first thing is come to humility that I don't know God. And then the God that I want to know begins with the gospel. I think sometimes new believers run past the gospel and they want to run to higher learning and they have not learned the basics. Even churches, sometimes you come in and they teach, they'll teach spiritual responsibility. Like this is what a Christian does. He prays, he gives, but they don't teach personal intimacy.
It's kind of like you go into your new job and you're told like the rules and like the things that you should abide by and the way you should behave, but you never got to know the owner and the one who started the company.
The vision. You
don't know the vision you don't know the heartbeat behind it, right?
I'm just sitting here. Yeah, I'm not. But then you tell me, please be passionate.
Right. Still hold to the
come on
the brand.
Yeah, but the thing is, if in the simplicity of and this is the 2 Corinthians 11, the simplicity of the gospel, the simplicity of Christ. I find that many people that really question salvation don't understand the opportunity of salvation. Like to get back to what God knows. I don't want to begin my conversation about what God knows. I want to begin my conversation based on what God has revealed to me.
Yes.
Because that's personal.
Okay, so let's talk about that. That's the orientation that you're talking about. You're saying, I'm not going to try to reach the ends of his knowledge and his mind and his ways, right?
Yes.
But you're saying, I want to get to know or I prioritize the things that he's already done for me, the things he's already revealed to me and to us, right?
Yeah, that's instead of chasing unrevealed revelation, let's walk in what God has revealed himself to be.
I'm a big believer in this. And that sounds so, it's a simplistic approach.
It is.
It is. Like we're complicating, I think, we have a short life. I don't see
James 4:14, your life is literally like a vapor. It's here today, and there's so many things in the market to prolong your life, to improve your life, to extend your life, but no one's ever figured out how to beat death. So, okay, I have a short period of time. In time, God has given me, as a believer, I'm a new believer, I want to know God in a personal way. Okay, so I don't want to get caught up in responsibility.
Yes.
I want to get to know the God of opportunity. And that means I take some time and understand what happened.
Yeah.
Like I feel the same way about, say, baptism. Okay, I'm not going to get baptized till I know exactly what's taking place. I don't just want to do it and then get on to higher things. Be careful when you chase unrevealed revelation and you run past revealed revelation. What has God already shown you? Okay, in the gospel we have the tenets of God loves me, God is for me. What's interesting, he never says sin. That's not. It's dealt with through the gospel, but it's not the conversation.
Yeah, that's
right?
not the focus.
I love you.
New believer.
Put your faith in who I am and what I've done for you, and as a result of that, you will have continued life with me versus life without. And that's pretty much the gospel. So there's a lot of things the gospel leads me into that I can grow in and learn on, and it's not. I'm not suggesting that we would not learn doctrine.
Right.
What I'm saying is be careful that you don't jump.
Yes.
So fast.
Yeah, because you're saying if we start with the simplistic approach, and you, like you're saying, we're not going to just throw out doctrine and the more categorical, the order of God's revelation, which is clearly spelled out in Scripture.
Yep.
But like if we don't practice the first mode as a way of life, perhaps we could miss the opportunities.
Sure.
Right? Like, let's just say I'm caught up. I jump ahead in my faith to the more complicated, and I miss the simplistic, which will always be present with me. It seems like that's going to be the case. Like, I think about some of the older folks in my life that have followed the Lord so long. One thing that I just traveled to France, and one thing that I saw with the believers there was the simplicity of their faith. It was like they never left where they had first started. But of course, if you dug deep into them, they were like a wealth of information, and they were theologians in themselves, but they never left. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's got to be a foundation. I've got,
and I love that about that. They're nearing the end.
Yeah. Take care of how you build. I mean, what are you building here? Are you building a religion? Or are you building a relationship? If it's a relationship, I'm going to take my time and I want to really get to know the person in the relationship, which is God. Because you can talk about what God knows and what God will do, but I want to deal with the gospel for me.
Yeah.
The gospel for me. And then that gives me God's heart. In the gospel is God's heart. I'd rather know God's heart towards me, right, than trying to guess what God is thinking.
Yes,
because
towards humanity.
Yeah, towards humanity, because that's not personal for me.
Yeah.
That's not relevant in that way to me. I think sometimes we make the argument too sophisticated, and we think that we get definition through sophistication because that's intellect, right? Today's intellect is the more sophisticated it is, you get more definition, you get more clarity, but I think with faith, there's going to be a lot of holes.
Yeah, yeah.
With faith, a lot of holes. You're going to have places where there isn't clarity.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, like depending on where you land on this, there's like the hyper Calvinist view of this question, and it leads to a very very rigid and very like 16th century Reformed thinking. And for all those brothers out there who we love and I'm very close with in my own personal ministry, I have personally chosen when I went to Bible school too, I landed more on the other side, not the Arminius side, but like more in the middle, which was you can hold to some of these points, but the limited and unlimited atonement was like such a sticky revelation. And where you go in that really affects, I think, your opportunities and the way you view your opportunities in life. For example, the limited atonement, and not to get too theological because I wouldn't even dare try, but that we would get in the driver's seat, or like I said, stand on the judgment seat and view the world based on a limit where we can see that God, like it says in Isaiah 53:6, it says that all we like sheep have gone astray. It was such a starting point that if all have gone astray, salvation would be for all men. And I like the completeness. I think the completeness of God, when we look at it, we can say that it must be unlimited. And it brings us to a place where, think about this, you're like a missionary that's been like everywhere around the world. Because of the view of unlimited atonement and its beauty, is that no matter where you go, there's an opportunity.
Yeah, you have to
think about that. Like,
you have to see. Otherwise,
I love that.
I find theologically the target group of people just can get very narrow.
Yeah.
And that goes against, in my opinion, that goes against the heart of God.
Right.
Why would God be narrow in his ministry toward man? If we were created for his good pleasure, Revelation 4:11, why would he limit his own pleasure?
Yeah.
Why would he limit the opportunity?
And have to allow us to kind of make those decisions as well.
Well, that's the other side. It's like, okay, how much does God know? How much does God superintend? How much does God influence? How much do we participate? And those are the two gigantic questions that pretty much address the major thoughts about predestination, election. I'd also say foreknowledge.
Yeah.
That's where that's at. But when you think about salvation, there are some who think that we have no control, that God's already decided. So we're just walking the earth and just waiting for God to make it real to us. And there's some that believe that we can choose.
Yes. And
those that believe that we can choose believe that then those that challenge whether free will is even a valid question. Is it really free? Yeah. And this is where this thinking is going. But I'd rather lean toward the side of the opportunity being complete.
Yeah.
Because when you begin, because if the opportunity is not complete, then where's your evangelism? If the opportunity is not complete, then why is there a call to the gospel? If the opportunity is not complete, then where is it? We don't have a complete cross. We have a cross that's limited, very narrow. Christ died very narrowly. He didn't die universally.
Well, and again, like the logic, it seems, in the 16th century was that people were saying that God wouldn't die, like he wouldn't like shoot his arrow of salvation and watch it fall to the ground, because a human being, a man or a woman, denies him. And I think that's interesting. Like, would God die for someone who doesn't actually accept his forgiveness? And like, to me, like drawing that line that he would withdraw that and say, because I foreknew it, I'm not going to give it to you. It speaks, I think, to a place or an orientation, like you were saying, that I am now deciding who God possibly has or has not decided. I don't think it's right for us to judge that, and that's the challenge I say to myself. I say, Raj, don't put yourself in the seat, the driving seat of who and who will not. Look at scripture, like in the book of John, we see John is the healthy book of view of whosoever. Sure. It's the great gate of salvation, right? And on one side, we see that people are called. And on the other side, we've seen in a picture drawn that you have been chosen, right? You go through it as you see you're called, this great gate. And on the back side of it, you view it and you can see it after being saved as chosen. Now, to me, the outward effects also of this view can really stifle, I think, like our faith in a very practical and easy way.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say a God who loves the whole world but didn't die for the whole world.
Yeah,
and didn't give the whole world an opportunity.
Well, think about this as a father of, like, let's say 3 children, right? And one of the children makes a a determination that the father loves one more than the other, right? Like one is now less loved than the other. And the child is the one making this determination. You know, he's not maybe necessarily knowing the father's heart. He doesn't know the parent's heart. He doesn't know all the knowledge that's there and all the background before everything that had taken place. So now the child, let's say the older child, just says, you know, I base my relationship with this other sibling based upon what I think the father thinks about him or her. And that affects that relationship in, I would say, I mean, drawing the conclusion that it's not in a positive way, right?
Yeah, I think so. We got to be careful when we try to evaluate the intentions of God beyond what he said.
Right.
So I've got to live where God speaks, and the rest is sophisticated interpretation or private interpretation, to be honest with you. But also to the thought, one of the big issues about salvation that follows, and that's our next point, is hell. That is those two camps, that's a huge issue. There's some that teach that double predestination where God has not only predestined some to heaven, but he's also predestined them to hell. They were designed to go to hell, basically. Is it morally good for God to send people to hell? Hell is not about the morality of God. It's about the morality of man. Once again, it's the same with the other question. I'm looking at the wrong end of it.
Yes.
So salvation, I shouldn't be looking at what God is thinking, his intention. I should be looking at God's expression. Okay, hell is not so much about God as much as it's about man. Hell wasn't even made for man, to be honest with you.
Yes.
But it's a destination of man based upon man's decisions, not based upon God's determination. It's that God didn't determine people to hell. God offered an opportunity, and they chose to. Basically, hell actually is God giving you what you want. So is heaven. I look at hell this way. Hell is the life you wanted with God on the earth. God gives you in eternity. If you wanted a godless life on the earth,
separation from him,
he will continue to give you that in eternity. Heaven is the same thing. You want a life with me in time by faith on the earth. That continues into eternity. So both men, they continue to live their life into eternity.
Right.
Now, granted, we don't really know the benefits of heaven until we know Christ. And we also don't really know the destitution of hell until we know Christ. Wow. So knowing Christ helps us to understand these two places. But is it morally good for God to send people to hell? Or is it the better question is it morally good for God to allow them to actually decide how to get there?
Wow.
Because that's the real truth. No one's in hell because God decided. They lived their life and made a choice.
So you're speaking to the will of men.
Yes.
That has been gifted by God himself.
Well, that's what reasoning is.
Yeah.
I mean, God gave us the ability to choose free will. He gave it, and he empowered us with the consequences there, but he also gave us reasoning, which allows us to exercise those questions. Imagine that we could literally choose without the ability to reason. Reasoning actually stimulates that.
Right.
When I reason, I have questions and I choose. So I think the standard is unfair in the sense of judging God about the morality of whether he should send amoral people to hell.
Well,
because if you start questioning the morality of God, stay with me for this for a second. He's no better than the Greek gods.
Right.
Because Zeus, Hera, Athena, they were supernatural people that had questionable morals.
Yeah.
They had the morals of they were above man physically and powerfully, but they had the same corruption that man had. They were jealous, yes, adulterous, everything we do, they do, but they're gods. So there wasn't much separation there. So when you begin to attack God's morality is endorsed by character. So when you say is God moral to send people to hell, then you're saying it's out of God has poor character. And if you question that part of God's character, you question all of his character. So the integrity is gone.
The whole thing gets
and you
out.
lower God to the place of Zeus or the Roman gods or the Greek. You've lowered him to being capricious, to being
finicky.
Revengeful, payback, petty. You make God petty is what you do. So I don't think it's a fair question to ask, is it morally good for God to send people to hell? But rather, I'd rather speak about why they are in hell. Hell is a consequence of man's decision, the way he lived his life without knowing God.
Right.
Hell is a result of someone who makes a decision not to take advantage of
and
the
also,
opportunity.
even before man, we have Lucifer, right? We have the fallen angels. They're also a very good example of the same result where rebellion, the iniquity, trying to be greater than God, trying to be better than God, and the pride and arrogance that caused the fall, it redirected them to the polar opposite of where God was, right?
Yes.
He was struck down by thrown down to the earth like lightning.
Yes.
So if we can see that also the devil and his army, his fallen angels, they're also choosing and are going in this direction. Like we understand that because of the deception of Lucifer and the snake in the garden, that was exactly what he wanted man to do. He wanted for him to come along and ride the journey to the place of eternal separation, because that's what hell represents.
Yes.
So where does God fit in this picture? I don't actually see God, like you were saying, I don't see God fitting in like morally into the picture. Actually, like you're saying, like the finger's pointed at us.
Yeah.
And the finger, we could also say, is pointed towards the devil, he being a forerunner of this.
But have you noticed here this underlying thread of trying to hold God accountable?
Yeah.
For man's frailty? Like,
Well, it goes back to this whole orientation thing.
Yeah. If I come at God like God has got it wrong, we try to sit there and say, okay, if God knows everything, then why would he make a plan of salvation for people? Because, what's the point of getting saved? Once again, you're going to indict God for his plan. His plan is not correctly set up right. I'm judging it. Oh, is hell a good thing? Well, if God's such a loving God, then why is there a hell? Well, once again, it's you on your soapbox evaluating God. Because you got it all together.
and so if you were to take that like picture, right, of like the one up above us and the one that's right and the one that's just, I was thinking about this in Ezekiel. When you read Ezekiel, God's going to judge his people, right?
Yes.
And you think about this, like, have you ever seen someone so angry and so upset about like a certain situation, and they're going to come down and judge and proclaim punishment, right?
Sure.
Usually in that case, the person that we're looking at either is going to be 100% just and right for doing so, or he is under the limelight and he's questionable that he might not be just.
Yes.
So, but when we're dealing with God, we cannot forget that he's 100% just.
Yes.
He is 100% right no matter what. So with that starting point,
yes,
I can then say, like it says in Ezekiel 18, twice it says this actually, as he's coming down with the separation of souls that die and those that win based upon sin. And he says, for I have no pleasure in the death of anyone, declares the Lord God. So turn and live. He is casting down the judgment.
Right.
And he is saying, as he is doing it as a just God, I have the right to do this and I will fulfill my justice. But just so you know, I don't find this pleasurable at all.
Wow.
And I think that's interesting that the most just one is the one that finds no pleasure in it.
And the one who's not just has a lot of pleasure in it.
Oh my gosh. Like think about
Romans
that.
2:15, we accuse and excuse. And I live in this world where I validate, it actually comes to a lack of accountability. I validate the life I'm living by attacking the God that I'm serving. Wow. And I look at what I don't have in my life and I say, that life is not good because of God. God's not fair. God's not right. God's not morally good. So because God is not morally good, I have permission to live immorally.
Wow.
So the question, you said it very good. It's like, I have to have the right orientation. It's like when to be honest with you, I don't think we know how to approach God. We have the faith. We're equipped to approach God.
Sure.
But I think you have to learn how to approach God. You have to learn to come to God, number one, Hebrews 4. You have to learn how to approach God in humility. You have to learn how to approach God in his character and nature. I think if you see God for who he is and how he's introduced himself to us through the gospel, then you're not challenging his morals.
Yeah. I mean, and listen to this. In Ezekiel 33, when Ezekiel, he's talking about this watchman.
Yep.
It's very interesting that it says in verse 17, and this is along the same as in chapter 18. He says, yet your people say, the way of the Lord is not just. When, and this is him speaking, when it is their own way that is not just. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Like the blame game.
Of course.
Like, you're the one saying, no. You are the one that is not
you
just.
gave me.
Right. Yeah. And I think it says we're really, I think, hitting something that's so valuable for us.
My
right?
approach. By the way, none of us really approach God. Let me say it this way. We're growing in our approach to God. We're growing and maturing in how to respond to him because we're learning who he is. We're learning how he is towards us. And that kind of governs and guides us in our approach to him. Like God leads me in approaching God. So we're learning that. And in the learning, it's important that I approach God not on the basis of my own standard of morality, right?
Yeah.
The whole week we've been told, is God moral? Well, according to my standard, no.
Yeah.
But according to his standard, yes, he's the standard for morality. How do you question the righteousness of the standard of righteousness? Only arrogance does that.
Yeah.
Which is like, if I have the humble approach, okay, he's the source. He's not the expression, he's the source. So anything that's shared character attributes with us came from him.
Yeah, and that's a real blessing that we would be revealed that.
At least to can participate in the righteousness of God. It's not ours. It's never ours.
And
right?
you can imagine like a guy like Ezekiel, he is so overwhelmed. I can't imagine like the revelation he receives of God's judgment being poured out on his own people because of their wickedness. And that's what it says. It says, he says it again in verse 11, I have no pleasure in the death of the wicked. He's like, it's like wicked. What do you mean? Like everyone wicked? Yeah, we're all wicked, fallen short. Like
that's the key. We have no spiritual capacity, which is why in Ephesians 2:1, we had to be quickened because we didn't have it.
Yeah.
That's why
right.
None of us were righteous. None of us. So if I'm in that seat, I'm not judging anything.
Right. Yeah, I like that term. I like that because it's a picture of like our new life with Christ.
Yes.
Isn't like a refurbished iPhone that God gives us. He's like, no. I give you a brand new one.
Like,
I'm not reusing any of this stuff that you have here like man does. We've fixed up the broken faults. He's like, no, I create a brand new one. Yeah. I like that. You know what I mean? Like to your point.
The spiritual Bill Gates, he just makes a new iPhone.
He does. He's like, I don't want no refurbished stuff. We got a lot of questions.
I'm going to talk from the top here.
I didn't look at see any.
Our God is eternal. Our God is everlasting to everlasting. He is high and lofty. Oretta says that he inhabits eternity. Our God is holy, 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 righteous and just. Our God is omnipotent, omnipresent, all-knowing. Yes. Shashal says, we need to empty ourselves to understand God. Very nice example, Pastor, how a child thinks and takes decisions in limited understanding. Man goes to hell for rebellion against a holy God. And he goes to hell because of the decision not to have a relationship with a holy God. Yes, choice made my man, not God, to choose heaven or hell. Yes, it's my choice. Yeah. I'm not in heaven because God decided I'm going to heaven. I'm not in hell because God decided I'm going to hell. Those are my choices based upon a life that I've decided to live here on the earth. Pastors, some say about predestination as an excuse to choose God's salvation. My understanding of predestination that it's not an excuse. It's actually a particular position about the way God thinks, and according to his plan and according to his expression of the gospel and his sovereignty. So I don't know if that's the question you want to ask, Shenshal, but there's never really like an excuse to choose God's salvation. There's two groups of thought that are out here. One of them is that God superintends it on people through a plan and through his will. And then there's another one that says we actually have to decide and voluntarily choose. It's either involuntary participation or voluntary participation, and that's the argument. I'm going to say, like I say, the opportunity is there, and we are equipped for the opportunity, which is why we have faith. We didn't have faith to believe for a job. We have faith to engage God. So if we have faith, if we are equipped for the opportunity and we're presented with the opportunity, then I believe that it's God's will we participate in the opportunity because that's why Christ died. So that's where I land on that. So we just want to be very careful when we start looking at morality, or more importantly, my orientation to God. What is the standard for my orientation to God? And it should be faith. It should begin with faith because you participate in spiritual things by faith. You participate in the revelation of God by faith.
Yes.
The challenge for us is the temptation to evaluate God outside of faith. The challenge for us is to approach God outside of humility. The challenge for us is to try to make God make sense in finite, corrupted minds. Because that's low-hanging fruit. I can reach for that every day and define God by my circumstances, or worse, define God by what he does and what he doesn't do and say that's God. Right? Rather than getting to know God through his gospel, getting to know his character and nature, and then letting my understanding of his character and nature govern my understanding of his plan.
Yeah.
Because if you know the brain of the man behind the plan, then you understand, at least in part, what's happening in the plan.
Yeah.
But if you're just staring at the plan, you do a whole lot of guessing about how things are supposed to go, why this intention is kind of lost. So
I love this thought about orientation, Pastor Renaldo. And I think, as you look in the book of John, in chapter 1, it's like, behold, the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world.
Yes.
And what a precious gospel that is, that arrives on the scene.
That's why you have a hope. I mean, when you understand the opportunity, your orientation to God is hope.
Yeah.
When you don't understand the opportunity, your orientation with God is suspicion.
Yeah,
your orientation with God is insecurity. And that cannot be God's will for the abundant life in time for his people. And I've met folks that have very strong positions. There's whole denominations that have very strong positions. And when I hear them speak on this, I don't hear words of hope.
Yeah.
I hear words of separation, isolation, indictment.
It's kind of fatalistic in a way.
It's a dark view of God and of mankind. There's no hope in that message. Colossians 1:27, Christ in you is what?
The hope of glory.
The hope of glory.
Yes.
You're not going to give me a life, an abundant life, and a gospel that's not hope-oriented. If you you can take a lot of things from man. You can take his money. You can take a lot. When you take hope from someone, they lose purpose to live.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of Christians right now that are locked up in bondage to messages that don't have hope. And when you don't have hope, then you begin to challenge all these different thoughts about is God a good person? Is God morally good? All these things are on the table because of your orientation to God. Do you have an orientation to God by faith and humility on the expression of who he is?
Yeah.
So that's our thought this week. It's been an amazing week talking about the morality of God, but let's cap this and understand that we're not in a position to judge God from our viewpoint of what morality is. It's got to be his standard, not our standard. And when you measure him by his standard, he measures up. It may not completely make sense to you, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with walking with God and not understanding everything. We're going to learn in eternity for the rest of eternity about who God is. This is not a full education here with the plan of God.
Man, I can't wait for that.
You kidding me? This might even be kindergarten. Eternity.
We're in preschool.
Yeah, preschool. You get PK. So this is where we are.
Yeah.
We just want to encourage you. You don't have to know everything about God, but you have to. You ought to, by faith, have the right orientation to God.
Yes.
I want to approach God in humility and say, okay, God, I have this opportunity to know you through the gateway of the gospel. I want to start there. And then that will give me a heart for other people. And with a gospel that's for everyone, I not only have hope, but everybody that I know has hope. You put hope in my world with the gospel. It cannot be a limited atonement. It cannot be a narrow viewpoint. It cannot be pre-selected people that would know God. The vocabulary would be a whole lot different throughout 66 books.
Yes.
if it was that way. So thank you so much for joining us. Hallelujah. God is on the throne. We can know him whosoever. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be here at 6025 Moravia Park Drive this weekend. Sunday is for services at 9, 11, and 6:30. We'd love to have you come and join us. It's a great time to be around.
And congratulations to Greater Grace Christian Academy.
Oh, that's
last
right.
day of school today.
It's
Jubilee.
the last day of school. You know what?
Come on.
School's over.
Congratulations, students.
Yes. I'm sure they think that. It's like escape them free. Anyway, God bless you. Please subscribe. Join us. These are great times. These are great times to think about the gospel and think about doctrine. Also, come on down around and be around the property, 6025 Moravia Park Drive. It's convention time. See you next week on Grace Hour.